Just fucking do it. Subscribe now. Alright, welcome to this special episode. So I'm gonna mix some salt water right now and I'm gonna do a water change on this 65-gallon tank. So this tank's been set up for quite some time and I moved it here and then I did the aquascape twice. Alright, so you're gonna see me open the water and then I'm gonna pour the water into the bucket and start throwing the salt in. I usually put a little bit of water so I can stir it a lot and then mix as much salt as I can, and then I add more water. So the water I'm using is reverse osmosis water. You want to get the best filter water as you can. Reverse osmosis tends to be the most cleanest water for saltwater aquariums. So mixing the salt's not that hard. So all you gotta do is pour the entire contents in. So since this is a 5-gallon mixture, I'm just gonna mix it in with the rest of the 5 gallons of water right here. If you have a little sump pump, you can put the little pump in here and it'll stir the water for you. It'll dissolve all the salt for you. Now that I remember, I mixed a 10-gallon mixture of salt and I have 10 gallons of water. So what I do is I pour half and half of the fresh water in here. So what I did is I grabbed half of the 5 gallons from each of the jugs. And then I mix the salt and then I'm gonna pour in the concentrated salt water back into the fresh water. And that should make the equal chemistry. And like I said before, it's not that hard. It takes me about like 20 to 30 minutes to mix this whole salt. So this is a little mixed reef tank. There's quite a lot of different corals. There's a lot of Euphilia, soft corals, and SPS coral. All the frog spawns in the bottom, we are struggling to find a place to put them. So we put them in the sand for right now. But as you see, they're pretty much overgrown. If you want some of these frog spawns, I'm sure the owner of this tank will sell you some. So if you want some, just hit me up and for sure we'll send you some. So the new fish in this aquarium is the lunar wrasse in here. It's pretty aggressive, but so far it hasn't killed the coral banded shrimp. There's a coral banded shrimp in here. Every time I come in, they usually get something new. So the new fish, I guess, is the new thing that I'm seeing today. But there's always something new that they add in, the owners of this aquarium. There's also a blue tang that's pretty cool, the blue surgeon fish. So this is the tank where I grabbed the sea anemone. I grabbed one of the ones in the middle. As you see, the other anemones are pretty big. This tank's very unique. At first, we started with just one sea anemone, and then we had 3. I was given one of the anemones, so now there's 2. These particular clowns are pretty aggressive. They always attack me every time I do a water change. As you see, I'm still mixing the water. It'll take some time to dissolve, but right now I'm just doing the feeding. I like to feed before I do a water change. So mixing the salt's not that hard. I usually mix with a little bit of water at first to get the salt dissolving, and then I start adding the rest of the water. So right here I'm scraping some of the algae, but then I saw the magnet in the back, the little algae magnet, so I decided to use that instead. So as you see with the algae magnet, it's pretty simple to do this. It's easy to clean the algae off the glass. I usually avoid the bottom of the sand so I don't scratch the the glass aquarium. When you have sand inside of the magnet, you could scratch the glass real easy. So I'm being careful not to go all the way to the bottom. But I'm just gonna remove the front algae just a little bit. All right, so I have all the water mixed up and then I throw them back into the jugs, and then now it's time to actually siphon the water. So I always siphon the gravel. The siphon tube that I have is pretty small. This is the personal one I have. I couldn't find the longer one, so I just used whatever one I had. So sometimes I get stuck with the sands because the tube's pretty short. So what I do is I have to sometimes restart the siphon. And again, I always have to look out for the clowns because the clowns always keep biting me. And I always highly recommend for people to gravel vac their sand bed. You don't want to have a lot of the nastiness in the aquarium. And like I said, a lot of the sand always gets stuck because I always have to watch the clowns, and then the siphon tube is pretty small. So right here what I'm doing is I'm topping off the fresh water to replace the evaporated water. So in this system, there's two power heads and the return. So we just got to monitor all the corals and see how much they like the water flow. But obviously they've been in here for some time, and that's why they're pretty much big and grown up. One of the things I don't like is the power head in the center, all the way to the very top. As you see, the anemone's kind of pretty close to it. So I kind of moved it a little bit, but like I said, you just got to watch your anemones and power heads. I lose most of my anemones through the power heads, so that's something you want to watch out for. This particular anemone's been close to that power head for quite some time, and I don't think it's going to move, but that's something that I told the homeowner and she knows about it. But we're just having an eye on it, and something you want to consider. You always want to consider what kind of power heads you get. Sometimes you'll be able to put like a piece of foam or some kind of mesh netting around it so you don't kill your anemones. This tank kind of has a lot of sand, so even if I gravel vac out some of the sand, I'm not going to throw it back into the aquarium. You want to try to gravel vac as much of the sand as you can. I know that under the rocks it's kind of hard to get to, but I put the rocks underneath the sand. You want to gravel vac as much as you can. There's definitely a lot of sand to go through, but these 10 gallons of water will make a big difference, but I won't be able to gravel vac the entire sand bed. And again, you want to have a longer siphon tube. This tube is too small, but it's more meant for like a small nano aquarium, like my little 14 gallon. Normally what you want to do is you want to remove all the corals from the sand bed and put them somewhere. And then you want to start gravel vacuuming, but I'm just going around the corals and everything. And like I said, it constantly gets stuck with the sand, so I had to kind of always restart the siphon. Contrary to what you hear from other YouTubers that never gravel vac the sand, don't ever listen to them. You always want to gravel vac the sand bed and get everything out. If you compare the old saltwater to the new one, you'll see a big difference and you'll be like, oh yeah, I got all that nastiness from the aquarium out. There's a lot of YouTubers that'll tell you that it's bad to gravel vac their sand bed, but if you give me access to a dirty sand bed, honestly, I'll revolutionize that aquarium. Even if they think that the corals are doing good, I can make the corals look a lot better just by cleaning out the sand bed. They'll come out and they'll fully extend even more. So the owner of the aquarium constantly tests her tank and she always writes down her concentrations of all the chemicals. She has a little logbook where she writes everything down. So it's a good thing to have a little logbook with you. But like I said, me personally, it's been a long time since I even tested an aquarium. I can't even remember the last time I tested one. Honestly, I'm not doing anything special. You should be able to do this at home, especially if you're using the salt that I give you. You should be able to just have these results or even better results. You could have your own special corals that you like. And like I said, it will really help you out. Since I calculate most of the major elements, you don't really have to worry about having any two-part systems or two-part dosing or whatever. You don't want to add anything special to the aquarium. All you got to do is just add a little bit of iodine and a little bit of amino acids and trace elements. I'll show you the bottles in a little bit. So water flow is one of the major components you want to think about. And like I said, the order of importance to me is water chemistry, lighting, water flow, and then feeding and filtration. If you're able to master all those elements, there's no reason for you not to be successful. For me, there's no system I haven't been able to do or help and become successful. So like I said, as long as you contact me and you really want to be successful, we'll make it happen for you. All I got to do is just follow what I'm doing and do as I say, and there's no reason for you to fail. So if you have all these elements down and your corals are still dying, there's a good chance there's poison in the water, electricity, or something that we're not thinking about, but there's no reason for you to not be successful if you have all these 5 elements down. So just remember, as long as your water chemistry, lighting, water flow, feeding and filtration is good, there's no reason for you not to be successful. So you always want to clean the water that you spill out. And as you see, the dirty water from the bucket is definitely a lot dirtier compared to the new clean salt water that I'm going to add. So you see in the overflow box, you see like this Pavona like coral, this little SPS growing in the corner on the top left. That thing started from like a small piece and then it grew that big. Pavona grows pretty big. And also you can see other types of corals in here, but they kind of look small compared to the other corals around it, especially the sea anemones. If you pay close attention next to the gravel tube right now, you can see a lot of the acans that are right there. These little red acans, they're pretty big, but as you can see, it looks kind of small compared to everything else. Me personally, I don't like having any corals on the sand bed. But like I said, all these corals kind of outgrew the tank and we had to kind of find a place for them for right now. Some corals you could put them where they could touch each other, but personally, I like to give room to every coral. So there's two major colonies of frog spawn. The colony grew too big and it kind of broke in pieces when we were removing it. So that's why you see a lot of frog spawns scattered everywhere. So I'm gonna try to put some of the frog spawns back. I tipped them a little bit over when I was gravel vacuuming, and I just don't want them to be touching each other. So the Kenya trees grew kind of big, and they pinch off little daughter Kenya trees throughout the tank. So you'll see little Kenya trees throughout the whole system. If you do use salt water and you throw it in the aquarium and you see a negative reaction, there's definitely something wrong that you did. It might be a temperature thing or simply the salt concentrations are too different. In the new salt water that I made, the water is too cold, so just 10 gallons of water in the 65 should be plenty. If it was in the summertime or in the spring, it'll be a lot easier to do a larger water change. But you never want to change more than 50% of the water because that's when you start killing stuff. So as you see, even though I dumped the cold water in there, there's nothing really wrong with the corals. They haven't showed any signs of a negative reaction or anything like that. And that's what you want. If you do a water change and there's a negative reaction, yeah, you definitely want to check out what you're doing, especially the water chemistry. So what I'm doing is I'm just taking the salt water and I'm dumping it back in, and I just got to watch the water level when it drains because you don't want to add too much because it might not drain fast enough and then you might spill water into the living room. But as you see, the sea anemones are pretty much wide open. Everything's open, nothing closed up. And that's what you want. That's how you know you did a good water change. Also, remember to clean the glass and try to make it look as spotless as possible. So I'm putting my hand in the aquarium so you can see the reference size of the anemone. The anemones are pretty big and all the corals are. So that's how big the system is. I mean, the corals in the system are. As you see, depending on the angle, it'll capture a different light on the camera. And the tank might look a little bit different, but that's pretty much it. And like I said, all you gotta dose is a few elements in here. And there's a little bit of iodine and a little bit of amino acids and trace elements going into the aquarium. And that's all you really do. And when the water evaporates, use a 50-50 mixture of sodium carbonate and hydroxide into the top off water. And that should keep your pH high and stabilize it. And that's all you got to do. If you don't do no water changes in every top off water, just add a little bit of hydroxide and the baking soda, okay? So if you want to have similar results to this, like I said, it'll be pretty easy for you to do and to replicate. All you got to do is just get started. The hardest part is just to fucking get started. If you're always thinking about it, you're never going to do anything. So if you observe that tank carefully, we built the reef around the anemones. As you see, the anemones have their own little space, so all the corals are built around it or placed around the anemones, far away from them. Definitely the anemones are the centerpiece of this aquarium. And for my tank, that's something similar that I want to do. I'm building the reef around my little tank around the anemones. But that's why on my tank, there's not that many corals because I don't want the enemies to go around stinging everything. So in my tank, I'm just waiting for the sea anemone to settle down into its spot wherever it likes. And then I'm going to build a reef around it just like this system. Only I'm going to add my corals, the corals I like, but also corals that could withstand the water flow that I have. So one of the things I like to do is just sit back and look at the corals and observe the fish and see how everything's doing. And then once I notice everything's doing good, I just pack up and be ready to leave. And you always want to observe your fish because sometimes they might be too aggressive when you're not really looking at the system. But definitely take a look at that. But right here, I'm going to feed a little algae clip for the surgeon fish. I'm going to put a bit of seaweed into the little clip. So it's a little magnetic clip. It has a clip on both sides. And so I'm just sliding it from the outside back into like in the middle depth of the water. And the algae clip is for the blue surgeon fish and for all the algae eaters in here. I believe only the blue surgeon fish is the only algae eater in here. All the rest are omnivores or straight predators. I want to thank everybody that subscribed to my channel and watches my videos and my lives. So if you have any questions, make sure you hit me up on the next live and then put in your questions and I'll be able to answer them. Or you could just put it in the comment section below and then I'll answer your questions. So another thing I want to do is to go live on StreamYard. That way I could post the link and you could join me. And then you could show me your aquarium and then we could be able to solve your problems, or you could just show off your tank. It would be pretty cool if you could just show us what you got going and then maybe you'll inspire more people to do what you're doing. So that's the end of the video and I want to thank you guys for watching and I'll see you next time.